My name is Jessica Van Meir, and I'm doing an MPhil in Development Studies. And my dissertation is about sex work in Argentina and Ecuador, based on interviews that I did in Buenos Aires and several cities in Ecuador in the summer of 2016 for my undergraduate thesis. And my master's dissertation focuses on how sex workers feel about selling sex and how the process of organizing themselves in collectives has empowered them and changed the way that they view themselves. So the position that believes prostitution is inherently exploitative and violent is called abolitionist feminism generally, and they believe that it's basically impossible to consent to selling your own body, that it is inherently objectifying and exploitative. And there's a strong abolitionist feminist presence in Argentina among anti-trafficking organizations especially, who say we don't really distinguish between sex trafficking and prostitution. We see prostitution as necessarily exploitative. While we recognize women's rights to make decisions about their own bodies, we think ultimately they're in a position of economic need and they're not really choosing this. And so they see the solution as basically shutting down places of prostitution, making it illegal to advertise for prostitution, basically trying to suppress it. Whereas people who are pro-sex workers' rights believe that the way to help sex workers is by recognizing prostitution as a legitimate profession, giving them workers' benefits, retirement benefits, and trying to improve the conditions within the industry itself. So in Ecuador, there are many local sex workers collectives, and there's a sex workers collective in each province of the country, which is, I believe, Ecuador is the only country in the world that has a sex workers organization in every province. And those collectives have been really powerful in improving conditions for sex workers, fighting for better treatment from brothel owners, and for more attention from the government to sex workers' rights. And I saw through sex workers' involvement in those organizations, they came to see themselves and their work not as something shameful, but as a legitimate profession, and seeing themselves as citizens deserving of rights from the government. And in Argentina, there's a national sex workers union called AMAR that works in conjunction with one of the major workers' unions in Argentina to fight for the government to recognize sex work as work. And then there's another organization that split off from the sex workers union that takes a different position in that they see prostitution as exploitation and want it to be abolished. And so they are working to help fellow prostitutes to leave prostitution. But I found in both organizations that those who were involved in the organizations kind of came to see themselves to feel empowered in a feminist identity, even though they had different ideologies. And see themselves as deserving of rights and better treatment from the government. So my master's dissertation focused a lot on sex workers' emotions towards selling sex and how they often conflict with each other and come into tension with each other. So something that really struck me in my interviews was that the majority of the sex workers I interviewed expressed that they did not like selling sex, kind of expressed disgust towards their clients, and said that they wanted to eventually leave and find another job. But at the same time, wanted the government to legalize it and recognize it as work, many of them, and for the government to provide them more spaces where they could exercise sex work, because a lot of them felt they didn't have a space to work. And so I was curious about kind of the tensions between these two things, like how can they, on the one hand, not like this, on the other hand, want the government to facilitate it. And many sex workers expressed both fear about violence from clients, violence from police, disgust towards having sex with strangers, but at the same time, gratitude and pride for the income that sex work brought them, and expressed how this had enabled them to care for their children, for those who were mothers, in a way that they wouldn't have been able to otherwise, or how sex work provided them better wages and better flexibility than wage work they might have had. For instance, working as a maid, they might have made a lot less and still been under very exploitative conditions. So many of them emphasized to me how this had enabled them to send their kids to school or buy a house or buy a car. And so I think when we talk about sex work, we have to understand the varied and conflicting feelings that they can have towards what they do, just like any of us have towards the work that we do.